Welcome, trained Viennese monkeys, to Geek Salad's Retro Movie Reviews from the Geek Salad Podcast. I'm Andy.
And I'm Mike.
And we are continuing on with our conversation Best Picture winners through the decades. So we've done the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. We brings us smack dab into the decade of ultimate nostalgia, the 1980s. And my personal pick for the Best Picture winner of the 1980s, 1984's Amadeus. I love this movie. All hearts, hands on heart, love this movie.
And I can totally see that because this movie is totally up your alley.
Oh yeah.
The only thing that would make it more up your alley would be if it was set in England.
I don't know. Here's the cool thing about it. They made the conscious decision not to have them affect English accents, which is kind of par for the course in costume dramas, especially period piece costume dramas. The cast is, I think, if not 100%, it's predominantly an American cast.
Yeah.
F. Murray Abraham, Tom Hulse, Elizabeth Berridge, Jeffrey Jones, Cynthia Nixon.
Yeah, Cynthia Nixon
is in this movie. Yeah, and it's just like all of these American actors.
Christine Ebersole as well.
That's right, Christine Ebersole, who, by the way, if you're not familiar, actually a Saturday Night Live alumnus.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, Autumn didn't realize that either. We were, so last week, we took advantage of a free week of Broadway HD, and we found the Bette Midler Gypsy on there, and Christine Ebersole was in that. She's a huge star on Broadway, but I had known her from like one of the other forgotten seasons of SNL, like not the infamous 1980-81 season, but the 81-82 season. Christine Ebersole was there. She did most of the singing on that.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But it's got this cast of amazing, dare I say, oddballs.
Yeah.
In this movie, in this gigantic movie, which was an enormous, I wouldn't want to say it's an enormous hit. It's 1984, so in comparison to like the movies that came out in 1984. 1984 is one of the greatest summer movie releases of all time.
Oh yeah, big time.
But this movie, for what it was, what it cost, it was a huge hit.
Oh yeah, I mean, it pulled in $90 million on an $18 million budget, so that is a hit.
That is a profitable movie. That is a very profitable movie with nobodies. Tom Hulse was best known for Animal House.
And honestly, I best know him as Quasimodo.
That's right. But that was after.
Oh yeah, I know. That's really the only other thing I know him from.
Yeah. Up to this point, one of F. Murray Abraham's biggest roles outside of Scarface was being a bunch of grapes in the Fruit of the Loom ads.
That's right. Yeah, well, that was F. Murray Abraham.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just this amazing, this oddball cast of characters. Starting off with Vincent Schiavelli. We opened the Vincent Schiavelli getting his typical Milos Forman cameo.
He's one of those guys that whenever I see him, like, oh, I know him. I have no idea what his name is, but I know who he is.
He was one of those guys.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I don't remember what prompted it. My daughter actually quoted, kind of like she quoted his line from Amadeus at dinner tonight.
Really?
Yeah, it was just like, oh, signore, this is the most delicious thing I've ever had. And it's just such a great, that was my first impression with this movie when I first saw it decades ago. I saw this on home video, like, I think in 1987. It had been a few years. And I always had an interest in seeing it, but, you know, with my tastes and everything like that, I didn't know if I was going to like it. And it took about 2 viewings for me to really, like, understand what it was about, because when you first watch the movie, it's for the production value that really just whacks you. How good that production value is, how good the wigs are, how good the sets are. And then you get involved with a lot of the subtler line delivery, just this very low key comedy.
And genuinely, as far as like the sets go, the sets are gorgeous, but realistically, there's really only like maybe 3 or 4 main sets.
Yeah. Well, there's the palace, there's the opera house, and there's
the apartment,
Mozart's apartment. I mean, there are other smaller sets there too. There's the smaller, like the Groundling Theater,
which I'm fairly certain was probably just the regular theater, just redressed.
Yeah. But what's interesting about this movie is it's for what on paper reads as Oscar bait.
Yeah. It's
about a historical figure. It has costumes, lush production values. It wins Best Actor. F. Murray Abraham wins Best Actor for this movie. And it's like, it's not a self-serious movie at all. This movie doesn't carry the pretension that other movies of its ilk carry. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen Immortal Beloved. All right, so essentially Immortal Beloved is Gary Oldman playing Beethoven. But they went that route. They went the more self-serious route because Beethoven was a tortured soul because he was going deaf. He couldn't hear. Whereas this one, it's one thing to watch Mozart self-destruct. But this isn't Mozart's story.
No.
This is Salieri's story.
And honestly, when I was just watching it through it, I was like, I think Tom Hulce should have been nominated for a supporting actor rather than
I agree.
Because he was really a backup player to this one, which is odd because the movie's called Amadeus.
Right, exactly. Touched by God. Which is, I would always be curious about the title until somebody mentioned that that's what it's about. Touched by God, born of God, the Deus part.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and so it makes sense that that's what it's called, the stage play, which I have seen a production of. That's where this originated from, Peter Shaffer's stage play, which is interesting because it's actually a play.
No, I mean,
but with music, but it's not a musical. Like, it's just you watch him conduct, but that's it. There's none of the big opera sets or anything. The choreography that they had.
Well, I mean, even when the title of the movie comes up, it's Peter Shaffer's Amadeus.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't even ask. I mean, this is your first time watching this movie. Thoughts?
Thoughts? It was a gorgeous movie. Production value absolutely there. This is just not a movie I would go out to see. It is not my style of movie. It was a really good movie. I could tell it is a great movie. It just is not something I would want to sit down and watch unless I had to review it for YouTube.
For this. Yeah. I gotcha. Yeah, I just feel like for myself, I mean, I can speak for my wife on this too, that it's just one of these movies that we just enjoy so much because it's eminently quotable, and not just from the main character. Jeffrey Jones as King Leopold is so, just the little things that he does, like that. Well, there it is.
Which is so odd because normally when you see Jeffrey Jones, he's not a likable character.
No,
he is a villainous or just rather unsavory character in a lot of things, and apparently in real life as well. But yeah, in this movie, he was actually a really fun guy.
Yeah, no, and the thing is also is because he was a king that had very common traits. He was like the whole thing about the too many notes. It's that the thing that he's thinking about the audience. He's thinking about what brings people to to the opera house. because
He's a
it's a
movie
state-run
producer
opera
as
house.
opposed to a movie director.
What's that?
He's a movie producer as opposed to a movie director.
Yes, exactly. And he fits in so well with that because there's a lot of, the only time he really does the Jeffrey Jones thing is when they cut the music for the dance scene. And he comes into the rehearsal and he's watching it, and then they cut all the music and then they just do the dancing. And he's just like, look at them.
I also love when he's like trying to play the piano, like when Mozart's walking in, he's like playing the piano, and they're like,
"Yep,
wonderful fire."
Yeah, it's great because he's the musical king. He's a massive patron of the arts, and that's what Salieri is the great composer of that day, and he has the king. He's got the king's favor, and it's so great that the king does not have an ear for music.
Salieri even says it.
Yeah,
he's like, he has no ear for music.
Yeah, and I like that about this movie, and I like the he's definitely holding in the frustration that he sees. But what I really love about this movie is that Salieri, as the movie goes into the first 2/3 of the movie, you're watching a man break.
Yeah.
From constantly trying to understand why this vulgar creature has been given these amazing talents. And he has given himself, he has dedicated his life to this. And he will never, ever come up with anything half as good as what Mozart created. Now, I will say that this is one of those movies that benefits greatly from being historically inaccurate.
Oh, yeah, big time inaccurate. Salieri was not a chaste man.
He was not. Not only was he not a chaste man, but they might have had like an unspoken kind of like creative rivalry, but they were actually very cordial to each other.
Yeah.
It only kind of comes to a head when they suspect that he murder Mozart. And it was just based on a letter that Mozart had written saying, "I think I'm being poisoned," but it was never proven. There was never anybody that had like credible evidence that he had done that. It just it makes a good story. I think between this and Gladiator, which is another movie that benefits wonderfully from historical inaccuracy, this movie works because of the way that you feel that jealousy, you feel that anger from Salieri, especially that scene where Mozart goes out at night and Salieri dresses, he puts a mask on and he's just kind of hiding, and they have Mozart doing all these things. He's playing upside down and everything, and then he asks him to play Salieri, and he just the contempt that Mozart had for his music.
It goes right to the very end. They they have that just like that moment where they're working on the Requiem together, and even then you're like, does Salieri actually respect Mozart, or is he just trying to still one up him?
I think the thing is that he respected him enough that he knew he could write better than Salieri ever could. Yeah. This was all a long scheme that he was going to write a Requiem that then Salieri could take credit for in the context of this movie, not in real life.
Yeah.
But I think he always had a grudging respect for him because he respects the music. He respects the art. He just didn't hold Mozart in such high regard.
Even at the end, before the end, but when he goes to see the Magic Flute, there's really no real reason, like in Salieri's big plot, for why he would go to see this play.
Well, it's the same reason for why he saw every performance of Don Giovanni.
Yeah,
it was Don Giovanni was a notorious flop, and he saw every production of it because again, It's about the music. So he's going to go see what Mozart's next creation is.
Yeah.
And it fits with his character. It definitely fits with his character. That, you know, what I liked about it too was that he's balancing, you know, between the, you know, he's still trying to be chaste. He's still trying to be a man of God and try to be a good person. And it's very evident in that scene where Stanzi like brings all the music. She's trying to get Mozart the commission,
Mm-hmm.
and she's literally willing to give herself to him.
Yeah.
And he realizes how deep this has gotten, and he actually presses it just because he knows she'll leave. That he knows that she won't go through with it.
Right.
And he knew damn well that was going to be the case.
Yeah.
It's funny. We watched a behind the scenes on Amadeus, and Elizabeth Berridge, who played Stanzi, was talking about that scene where Salieri invites her, you know, into his study, and those nipples of Venus, like she kept eating them throughout that scene, and she said that it looks great on camera, but she probably ate about 75 pieces of marzipan.
Ooh.
And it made her ill.
Yeah, that would.
Have you ever eaten marzipan before?
I have. It's good in small, very small doses.
Saturday Night Live a few months ago actually did a great thing on marzipan. And like these kids go nuts for marzipan, and then they have this chef, and it's like, what are you making? Marzipan. What's in it? Nuts. Is it done? Yuck. It's done.
Yeah, almond paste. Yummy.
Hey. But it was really interesting. What's also interesting too about Elizabeth Berridge is that I pretty much know her from two things. I know her from Stanzi and Amadeus. Yeah. I know from the John Larroquette show.
Oh.
From like the early 90s.
Yeah.
But
like she looked really familiar, but I don't recall ever really seeing anything else she's been in.
Just showed up in a lot of stuff. She was like in her early 20s when she did Amadeus.
Yeah.
It's interesting too because I think she does a lot with what she's given. Same thing with Cynthia Nixon. I feel like Cynthia Nixon in this very small part, and it's like I always forget that's Lynn is Cynthia Nixon about that because you know she's so prominent in that last third of the movie.
Yeah, and I mean Cynthia. This was like maybe her second or maybe third things that she's ever been in.
Yeah,
and you know she's gone on to do much better things. Well, maybe not better things, but
not better things. She also ran for the governor of New York about 10 years ago too. So there's that. But she is in the Gilded Age now, and she's quite good in that. But yeah, I think it just in entirety, I can totally understand this not being a movie that you would just, you know, it's a Friday night. What are you gonna do? Let's watch Amadeus.
Yeah,
it's not that kind of movie.
Yeah, and honestly, historical biographies, not really, just not my thing.
Right.
But I can recognize a good movie when I see it, though.
Right. And that's the thing with this movie, because the one thing it doesn't do, which is I feel like a lot of, especially music biopics do, they try to make the artist a martyr. And you think about that. I mean, I think back to Bohemian Rhapsody. They try to make him a martyr. You know, they don't do that in Rocket Man. And again, I'm always going to be on the Rocket Man bandwagon versus Bohemian Rhapsody and Elvis. They really made Elvis into a martyr in that movie. Even Immortal Beloved, it's just like this, you know, don't you see how much he suffers for his art? Now he's dead. Don't you appreciate him? Whereas with Salieri and Mozart, what killed Mozart? Mozart had an unquenchable work ethic that was hampered by the fact he was a chronic alcoholic. and that he didn't sleep, he didn't eat well, constantly out partying, and that took its toll. And with Salieri isn't a martyr either, because Salieri is a person who may or may not have driven Mozart to his, summarily lost his mind.
Yeah.
And then he was still again, historical inaccuracy aside, because Salieri was a huge, even after Mozart's death, he was a huge composer.
Yeah.
In Europe. But, the fact that he did slide into this obscurity where most classical music fans weren't familiar with Salieri until this movie came out.
Yeah. And, he did try to commit suicide and then, suffered from dementia for the last year and a half of his life.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And just seeing the, 18th century, or actually mid 19th century, insane asylums.
Yeah.
So
I would say my biggest gripe, though, because I literally just watched the last hour, maybe an hour ago or so before we recorded this. Was in that final scene, in the final scene right as Mozart's dying in bed. Stanzi just. She'd be pushing him to do this, to finish this requiem. Go do the requiem. Don't do that play. And I'm leaving you because of that, because you're doing that silly opera. And she comes back and, no, I don't want you to do this. I'm walking it away. Never. I was like, whoa, that's a complete 180. Real quick.
I think what happened was because she saw what it was doing to him. He was so obsessed with finishing it. Because keep in mind, the only reason why she wanted him to finish the requiem was because she had money in hand for that. Yeah. He was getting whatever the door receipts were going to be for the Magic Flute, but he was getting a commissioned work. She was pushing him to finish that because that is what paid. But when she saw that it was killing him, she comes back. She feels this guilt. Now she sees him, and the makeup that they did on Tom Hulse just to make him pale and sweaty, and just he looked, he was on death's door.
Yeah,
and that's I think what turns it, where she doesn't want him working on that anymore. He needs to rest. He needs to get his health back before he can finish anything.
She also seemed to have a lot of contempt for Salieri, and they really haven't had a lot of time together.
That stems from, and you're fortunate you watched the director's cut. It stems from him making the proposition to her.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because from that point on, whenever she does see him, it's with contempt.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No,
prior to that, he was a contemporary, and then it's with the contempt. That scene, by the way. There's the scene where he makes the proposition, but they add a little bit to that in the director's cut, where he tells her where to meet, and then she disrobes, which is what earns the director's cut the R rating as opposed to the PG rating that the theatrical release got.
Right.
That scene, that entire scene, is not in the theatrical cut. You can't find the theatrical cut to stream anymore.
Well, that doesn't really make sense, because that means in the theatrical cut they actually did sleep together.
No, they didn't. He makes the proposition, but it stops there, and she says no, she's not going to do that. She finds him repulsive from that point on.
Oh, okay.
But what happens is that she, the director's cut shows she was going to go through with it, and then Salieri knew that she wasn't going to.
Right, yeah.
She wasn't going to go through with it, but he had to get her out of there, and that's what happened. So either way, the conclusion is that she had nothing but contempt for him, which makes a lot of sense.
Oh yeah. Okay, that makes a lot more sense now. But I just the 180 flip on the Requiem part, that I was like,
it's more of an in the moment thing. It's more of a I can see what this is doing to you. You need to stop now. You need to get rest. Yeah. That's what caused that. It's not. I wouldn't say it's a plot hole in the character. It's just that once she sees him dying in bed, his health is her only concern. Yeah. Because again, what is a widow in 19th century Austria going to do with a child?
And actually, another historical inaccuracy: they actually had multiple children.
Yes,
but only two of which survived past infancy.
Right. And then there's there's that. The fact also is, I don't know. There's this really great YouTube channel called History Buffs, and he breaks down a lot of like the historical inaccuracies and how they work within the film, and if they work for in service of the film. And for anybody complaining that Mozart was being portrayed as this vulgar creature, he was.
Yeah.
He totally was. He actually wrote an entire symphony called "Lick My Ass Clean," and so he's just love the butt humor.
Looking back now with modern eyes, he seemed like he would be kind of on the spectrum, pretty much.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And not only that, but the obsessive compulsive behavior of having it. I know a lot of musicians who are like that they can't leave until they get something that they're working on right.
Especially if you're a prodigy, like he was.
Yeah.
When he writes his first opera when he's like what, 6, 4 or 5, 4, 5, 6.
Twinkle Twinkle Little Star is Mozart.
Really, he wrote that song? Really?
Yep.
You learn something new every day.
Yeah. So we don't need to talk about the music because the music is Mozart.
Yeah.
And very well used, I felt. I felt like they used his music very, very well in that. You know what? One thing I also love about this too is the poster. We don't talk much about posters because for the most part, there weren't a whole lot of like just solid release posters in this, prior to this era. The Sting's poster is kind of synonymous with the movie.
Yeah.
But when you think about Amadeus, the first thing you think of is that amazing poster with the, he's got the mask, the father's mask and the hat.
Mm.
And it's synonymous with the movie. You really don't see any physical media that doesn't have that on there.
Yeah.
You don't see it where it's like, a picture of Tom Hulce in one of those amazing wigs, just smiling. It's that poster.
With that laugh of his.
Huh?
With that laugh.
God, what a great laugh.
That is a very memorable laugh.
Well, that whole thing too, when he's trying to not be profane in the court, and he's just like, well, it's not like they're showing their, and then when they touch their, it's not obscene. You take them like they're these great gods that just shit marble.
Sorry.
They're Mozart's. What's funny too is that 2 of the courtsmen in the in Amadeus were also in the movie 1776.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, let's see if I can pull up their names real quick.
I do know that this was which one was it? One of the courtsmen's it was his final movie.
The Count Orsini?
No, because that was Charles K.
Yeah. I'm looking.
Me too. I actually was it? No. Yeah, this makes for.
Yeah, no, it makes for great conversation here. But also Kenneth McMillan, who you may know as Baron Harkonnen in Dune.
Yeah. I did notice that.
All of his stuff is director's cut.
Oh, it was the Kapellmeister.
Yes.
Yeah, Patrick Hines played the Kapellmeister, and this was his very last movie. He died a year later.
Yep. So it just is to me a fantastic movie. I do love this. Again, I understand. I'm glad you watched it. I'm glad you have an appreciation for it. Now that you can say you've seen it.
Yes, I can.
So let's go back to the Academy Awards of 1984 and see what it was up against. What did it beat? So Amadeus.
It won 8.
Yeah, hard to believe, with that type of production.
Yeah.
So it won Best Picture, beating out The Killing Fields, A Passage to India, which is, I think, David Lean's last movie, Places in the Heart, and A Soldier's Story.
Wow. All of those movies and Amadeus. One of these things is not like the others.
Yeah. Well, considering, too, what wins other awards. So for director Milos Forman, one for Amadeus. He beat Woody Allen for Broadway, Danny Rose, Roland Joffe for The Killing Fields, David Lean for Passage to India, and Robert Benton for Places in the Heart. F. Murray Abraham for Best Actor beat Jeff Bridges in Starman.
Wow. I did not realize Starman was an Academy Award nominated movie.
Yep. Albert Finney for Under the Rainbow, Tom Hulce, and Sam Waterston for The Killing Fields. If you must know Best Actress, Sally Field won for Places in the Heart, beating out Judi Davis. In Passage to India, Jessica Lange in Country, Vanessa Redgrave in The Bostonians, and Sissy Spacek in The River. Supporting actor, Hang S. Huh?
There was no nomination for supporting actor for.
No, there was not. I'm just listing them out. Hang Muir won for The Killing Fields against Adolph Caesar for A Soldier's Story, John Malkovich, Pat Morita, and Ralph Richardson for Greystoke, Lord of the Monkeys.
I always forget that Pat Morita was actually nominated for The Karate Kid.
Yeah.
Well deserved though, I think, because he gave one hell of a performance in what was essentially a popcorn movie.
Yeah. And then for supporting actress, Peggy Ashcroft won for Passage to India, beating Glenn Close, Lindsay Krause, Christine Lottie, and Geraldine Page. So let's see what else Amadeus won.
I still think Tom Hulce should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
I agree with that. I don't know if he would have. I don't think he would have beaten Hang Muir, because Hang Muir is playing a real person from like a much more recent era.
Yeah. But
interestingly, this is also the Oscar ceremony that Prince and Stevie Wonder both won Oscars.
Ooh.
Yeah, Stevie Wonder won for Best Original Song. Prince won for Best Original Song Score for Purple Rain.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Trying to see all the other Oscars that it won. Okay, so Amadeus won for Adapted Screenplay.
Mm-hmm. Art Direction.
Oh, I would be shocked if it didn't.
There's another shocker. It won for Best Costume Design.
Oh, yeah. Best Sound, makeup. Art Direction.
And
I think it went for cinematography, but all right, makeup.
What costumes for cinematography that year?
Oh, The Killing Fields.
All right. Yeah.
So
it was it was good cinematography. I don't think it was the best I've ever seen, though.
No, I mean, again, let me see. I mean, The Killing Fields is about Cambodia, so I can totally understand that.
Yeah.
Plus, it can't win everything.
Yeah.
So, all in all, again, I adore this movie. I'm glad you watched it. I'm really glad you watched it. You didn't find it offensive. So yeah. So excellent.
Yes.
So that, I think, does it for Amadeus.
I think so too.
Yeah. So let's do we want to hit the 90s next week, or do we want to just move on to something else?
I was thinking either we hit the 90s, or maybe I try and find a place to stream Everything Everywhere all at once.
I like where your head's at. It's showtime.
I mean, because it seems like it'd be a movie that is in my wheelhouse. And apparently it's phenomenal. And I love Michelle Yeoh.
Yep.
I love Ke Huy Quan, Jamie Lee Curtis. So there's nothing about the movie that doesn't sound like it's in my wheelhouse.
Mike, I got you on this one. And yes, I would love to. Because it just won Best Picture.
Yes,
I have to admit, I didn't intend on getting as emotional at this Oscar ceremony as both Autumn and I did.
Well, there were some emotional moments.
There were a lot of emotional moments on this. I mean, it was like one thing because when Ke Huy Quan won for Everything Everywhere, we were just crying. We couldn't contain ourselves. And then Jamie Lee Curtis. Now, I wasn't even rooting for her. I was hoping for Angela Bassett to win. But when Jamie Lee Curtis got up there and she thanked everybody and then reminded everybody who her parents were and that they had both been nominated.
Yeah.
So it was fantastic. I was very happy for her. 7 Oscars is amazing for this little movie. And we'll talk about that next week. But I will say also one last thing about the Oscars. Brendan Fraser. Or Fraser. That's actually how it's pronounced. Man, his win just destroyed me. I was so happy for him after everything he's been through in the industry.
Yeah.
I
mean, what a hell of a way to make a comeback, right?
Oh yeah. And I didn't ever realize. I always thought that Ke Kwan had stopped acting after Goonies. I didn't realize he was in there for another 5 or 6 years. He was in Encino Man.
Yeah.
I had no idea about that because it's been 30 years since I've seen Encino Man.
And he has gotten okay. He was actually I think one of the stunt coordinators on what was that now? He was stunt coordinator on X-Men.
Was he?
Yeah.
So he's still been working in the industry, but I know the interesting thing is too, and we'll get off of this after I bring up this little tidbit. Jeff Cohen, the kid who played Chunk, is an entertainment lawyer.
It was Ke Kwan's.
Yeah, he brought him up in his acceptance speech. He was the one who got him this role.
Yeah.
So, we'll discuss.
Goonies never say die.
Yep, seriously, it's awesome. But yeah, so that is we'll talk about Everything Everywhere next week. So, we want to know, what are your thoughts on Amadeus? Where does this rank in terms of your favorite Best Picture nominees? I'll leave us a polite comment below. Don't forget, we do this every week, so smash that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, help us in the algorithm. Also, Mike and I host a little podcast called Geek Salad. You can check that out wherever you get your podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcast. If you are on iTunes, be so kind as to rate us 5 stars because that's really all that matters. You can also follow us on our social media, which is at Geek Salad Radio on Twitter, Mastodon and Hive, and on Facebook at Geek Salad Podcast. So anyway, until next time, I'm Andy.
I'm Mike.
Go forth, be mirthful, and there it is.
Amadeus.